Hi. So yesterday we shared the lessons from the story of Deborah, and I'll just pick up from there today. And during the time of Deborah, Israel had rest for 40 years. But that cycle that we talked about, the cycle continued, and the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites terrorized them, destroyed their crops, stole their animals, and starved the Israelites basically. And the Israelites obviously cried out to the Lord, and he sent a prophet to call out their sin. So there was a prophet. Instead of sending a judge immediately this time, he sent a prophet, and the prophet spoke and let them know what it was that they had done. And then Gideon was the youngest in a family from the weakest tribe of Manasseh. Remember when I was talking about the tribes and I said Manasseh was the weakest because of Gideon? Now this is a correction. It was Gideon who was from the weakest of Manasseh, not Manasseh being the smallest or the weakest. And like we're seeing, God use anyone. We see that God can choose to use anyone that he wants. That's what one of the takeaways from yesterday's lesson. And today we see that he chooses Gideon, and he uses him to defeat the Midianites as one man. And when I read this as one man, I realized that it was because Gideon was not a man of war. So he was actually going to use someone who wasn't a warrior to defeat people who were warriors. Gideon was scared and very doubtful at first, but he showed a heart of obedience to the angel with a capital A. Remember the angel that came to him when he was under the tree, and I believe that was a theophany and possibly a Christophany as well, because remember that when he gave him he graciously, because there was no food, but he brought food to him, the angel used his stick and set the food on fire and then disappeared. But then when he was like, oh my God, I've seen God now spoke. So I believe that maybe, this was a collaboration, a Christophany and a theophany. And then he also showed obedience by obeying and destroying the altars of Baal, his father's altars of Baal, even though he didn't do it during the day because he was scared. He did it at night, but he still got caught. And then surprisingly, his father stood up, against to support him, and then he became known as Jerubbaal, like let Baal speak for himself. One thing I had found out was Gideon was the first to call God Yahweh Shalom, God of peace. Now moving on with the sign of the fleece, right? Remember when he said, if you said I should go make the fleece, Gideon was trying to get reassurances from God for the attack that he was commanded to execute. And God was actually very patient with him and gave him the signs he asked for. Remember, he asked for two signs, with the fleece. Choosing the 300 from the 32,000 men to go to battle was God's way of ensuring that the Israelites and all their enemies knew that the victory came from him and not from anyone else. Even using Gideon, who wasn't a man of war, was to attest to that as well, that the victory could only come from God. Although Gideon displayed hesitation and was unsure of God's command, God gave him all the reassurances that he wanted. And when he went down to the Midianite camp and heard the men telling and interpreting a dream, he was reassured that God was in control. Because did you notice that God actually revealed the future to the Midianites? I mean, this is the first time I'm noticing. In the Bible, when I think of dream interpretation, I think of Joseph, I think of Daniel, I think of all the prophets that were telling the bad people. Now, the bad people, in quotes, had the dream and interpretation. So to show you that God is not, deterred by whoever. He will do whatever he needs to do to make things happen. Gideon and his 300 men defeated the Midianites with noises, because remember, he had a torch and clay pots and jars which he was breaking, and that set about confusion orchestrated by God, and the other clans helped to defeat them. Now see, this just showed me another side of God. Before I go into my main getting to know God, remember we've seen with Jericho, God defeats the enemies with psychological warfare, and AI was like strategy, military strategy. Here we just see confusion. How amazing is that? And here's what I learned about God. Despite Gideon's repeatedly doubting of God and his command, God didn't get angry and he didn't rebuke him. Instead, he was patient with him and reassured him, and gave him all the reassurances that he needed. God knows us the same way he knew Gideon, who ordinarily wasn't qualified to be a warrior. But God knows us. He knows our weaknesses, and our weaknesses don't deter him from using us. And God's strength is made perfect in our weakness, just like we know in 2 Corinthians 12:9 when Paul said it. So the main lesson I got from this was that obviously, I'm not a Bible teacher. I'm just nobody, just ordinary. But I believe that God has empowered me to be able to do this. And I didn't do this because I felt like I was qualified to do it. But I did this for myself. And I hope that, learning, reading the Bible and learning and sharing the lessons are helping you too. And I hope it helps you too, to be empowered to do whatever it is that God has called you to do that you think you cannot do. Think of Gideon. God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. Thank you for joining me today. Tomorrow, we'll continue with the story of Judges. See you here. Bye.